2712-1. I just love you guys, and I appreciate you being here for us, and I appreciate you doing the things that you're doing, and I appreciate you building this. Please like this episode, as well as every other episode you do enjoy going on right now that I'm very excited about. And I see Doge, and I see the realignment of the educational system coming together for a real unique opportunity that we haven't had in a long time. And that's exciting more and more each day. It all comes back to coming back to yourself, taking your you have three brains, right? You have the brain of the head, you have the brain of the heart, you have the brain of the gut, gut instinct, right? I would love to really be able to get into some comfortable situations where we can start feeding back into the community that we haven't had in a long time. If we take the right approach, we have the ability to really dramatically affect not only the children growth, we could start turning revenues and rolling them into, for instance, here in this small town, seeing what kind of effects we have. We have coming up very shortly, as much as we should. And I think this is probably the strongest because it has emotion as well. And then those two signal to the brain to send out the chemicals that do the work that needs to be done according to whatever I have already talked a little bit about it with Emma on Emma Lynn and Grandpa Rod. Hey everybody, how you doing? I promise I am working on a new version of that. It's got the right message, but some of the editing I did is a little clumsy, and I want to fix that up. But I'm Rod Duff, joined as always by producer Barbie. And if you're joining us live, take a breath and settle in. Today's conversation is about vision, responsibility, and what it actually means to grow without losing yourself in the process. There comes a point in nearly every entrepreneurial journey when working harder no longer solves the problem. You've built something real. You've taken risks. You've made decisions that really matter. And then you hit a ceiling. Growth slows, pressure rises, and the next decision carries weight, not just for you, but for the people who depend on you. That moment is where today's guest lives and works. We're joined by Steve Walsh, venture capital investor, founder of Bison Equity Group, and author of the 10X Leap. Steve has spent more than 25 years operating where decisions come with real consequences: capital allocation, leadership judgment, risk, and long-term outcomes. What distinguishes his work is that it's not hype or bravado, but it is clarity. Steve doesn't talk about growth as a slogan. He talks about growth as more of a responsibility. Through his investing work and through Make the 10X Leap, Steve challenges entrepreneurs to stop thinking incrementally and start asking bigger questions. Is your business structurally ready to grow? Is your leadership prepared for complexity? Is your capital aligned with long-term stability? These questions matter not just in boardrooms, but in classrooms, in communities as well. Here at Insights and Straight Talk, these same questions shape everything. I mean, everything we do. Through our partnerships with Leaf Lab, the Regeneration School Project, and Voices at the Table, we're focused on helping people, especially the next generation, develop judgment, adaptability, and real-world tongue twisters here, and real-world decision-making skills. And through skills better than mine, obviously. And through the sponsors like the Mangum Library here, we are able to keep if I can keep talking these conversations, we can keep them accessible. We can keep them grounded and rooted in the belief that informed people make better decisions. Steve's work sits right at the intersection of all of this: vision, structure, capital, and responsibility. Today, we're going to talk about what 10X really means, why most people misunderstand scale, and how leaders can grow without breaking what they built. So with that, I just want to say a couple of things. Steve, welcome to Insights and Straight Talk. We are so glad to have you here, brother.
Great. Thanks a lot. Everything you said is like, wow, that's a big chunk to take on there right there that you talked about. But,
well, you are taking on a big chunk.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, the thing is, I look at entrepreneurs are fun to work with. That's, where I work. When I grew up, that's kind of where I started. When I was in my, I would say 15 or so, that's where I started. I was an entrepreneur back then. I was an investor and entrepreneur back then. What I did is I worked on motorcycles, and what I would do is build motorcycles, fix them up, and sell them. And that's where my start of my entrepreneurship started. And then on top of
15.
Yeah. So the other thing is too, on top of that, I read the Wall Street Journal all the time. And that was a crazy, I had really good mentors, and I go back to every time I talk to entrepreneurs is, who's your mentor? Do you have coaches? And that's one thing I look at is, even back then, I didn't know they were mentors, but I had some really good teachers. The teachers that really got me to
so important
to do things like read. I was a big avid reader back then. I struggled in school, but my teacher really saw something in me and said, start reading. And that's really what it took off. When I started doing a lot more reading, I would say that was probably the next step for me to get to the next level. But it also created one other thing that I had that I see a lot of entrepreneurs: grit. They have that grit to push through, the hard
100%.
The hard times that they have. What I look back then is into now is that grit. It's something that you can learn grit. I believe that it's a matter of it's like a muscle. The more you do that, the more things you can work with. It is that muscle that you can create, that stability, that you can push through any of the hard things that happen. And as an entrepreneur, it's not always easy. And one of the things I would say is find coaches, find the mentors along that have gone through it. They may not have been doing the same thing you're doing, but they can give you a lot of the things that you could probably learn from. And then on top of that,
okay, let me jump in right there. Sorry about that. I should have come in a little bit sooner. But I consider myself a safety net. This is an easy one, but I consider myself a safety net. And if I understand it, trust me, anybody in this audience, because they're way smarter than I am, will understand it. So I know what grit is, but can you expand on how grit, what it looks like? What does that look like? So I'm an entrepreneur, and I think more and more people are, and I think the more and more you have, the more and more in this evolving economy, I think there's going to be adjustments or facilities that encompass people becoming more entrepreneurial, because the old systems are different. Everything, AI, everything's different. What does grit look like?
Man, well, grit to me looks like,
there you go.
Sometimes when you struggle, when you're struggling, when you're telling people or telling you that, hey, this isn't going to work, things like that, the things that you do to get yourself to the next level, the consistently you're doing every day.
Okay.
It's a consistency that you see, that you continually do the work every day. It may not be easy, but it's that idea that the direction you want to go.
Clip it.
And you want to continually going with that. And that's the thing I would say is you continually want to get to that next level. And that is, you find systems, you people, uh, the things that get you to the next level. But also too is that grit is it's hard to I would say it is hard to define because it is something inside you that's pushing you to the next level, that you
Mm.
can go to the next level. You know that you've gone through this before. Maybe it's something that you did in high school, maybe it's something you did in college, or maybe it was something you did, just in real life. But you've had those struggles before, that you can get to the next level. No matter what, you can do that. You can get it to push through. A lot of times what happens is people say it was too hard, or I can't do it, things like that. Or somebody tells them that they can't do it. And they can't get through that. But that's the thing where you find people that say, hey, just the opposite. You are good enough. You are worthy of doing the hard things. You can do the hard things. And I would say that um, a lot of times entrepreneurs, they feel like they're alone, that they can't do, they struggle
Yeah.
with. And that is where you actually find a group of people that are entrepreneurs, because they're quite frankly, entrepreneurs like to be around other entrepreneurs. It's kind of like one of those things where they do enjoy that, and they understand the struggles, and they understand. But that's where grit really comes into play, is that they can share those problems that they've had, and they know that entrepreneur is either has it or doesn't. You know,
It's interesting you're saying that. I always talk about this on the show. We talked before the show. I think it was before the show in the green room, where I was saying we're at like 460 episodes now just in the
yeah,
last year, which is awesome, which is cool, which is a lot of freaking work. Rod Duff and producer Barbie is a marketing thing. It's just Rod Duff. I do the editing. I do all the producer Barbie's there. She's was with me, has been with me for 20 years, but she's in California and more of a marketing tool than a real producer. So anyway, my point being is, I think it's so funny as we see so many different expert guests on the show, and in different lanes, but let's say in this finance lane, and we're talking about investments and entrepreneurship right now. We're talking about business, and in this world, you see different angles or different approaches towards the similar messages. And what you just said was really, because as I go through this, and as I've been doing more and more of this, I see more and more, because this is about the middle class, and being where I am now, and then listening to these things and putting all these dots together, click it. It's interesting to me that it seems though we grow up in a system that teaches us to be, I don't want to say mediocre, but workers, to be the backbone, the not the entrepreneurs, the not the investment bankers, not that. We're taught to go this direction. And that's part of the Regeneration School project that we're fixing, that we're working on. But my point is everybody has that grit. And you said something that made me think of this whole rant I'm going off on, which was, when you were younger, something happened and you couldn't do it, or you had to move on, or this and that. And then you come back later, and we're taught to just, it didn't work, so move on. But we need to be taught more grit, because grit's the difference in what you just said. Grit's the difference between going back and saying, you know what, I really could have done that if I would have just done this or this or that, or had a Steve Walsh in my life as a mentor, or go out and looking for those things now. Isn't that interesting how our school system kind of, and you said we could go off on other tangents. This is a little bit of another tangent. Our school system is working against us to have grit, right?
Yeah. It's funny, I go back to when somebody said I couldn't do it, I always did it. If it's something I
Like
couldn't
it.
do, or if I couldn't, it was like maybe it was something that they didn't think I could do, or for whatever reason, I always did it. I always pushed myself to do that. If I couldn't get to the next level, I always did the hard thing. And that's the
But
part
you
that,
didn't pick that up in your traditional schooling either, though, did you?
no,
That's a more of a uniquity.
right, right. And
It's a bad word, but
that was just one of my things that when growing up is that, I kept on saying is, okay, what else can I do? And now in my life now, that's even more so. It's more so about, what can I do as a person, as can I grow? How can I grow? How can I, because I think as an entrepreneur or as people in general, that's really what you want to do. You want to grow as a person, you want to grow as a company. That's continually that thing, and growing and learning. That's, what it comes down to.
human beings. It's
Right.
human beings. That's how we're made of. We want to explore. We want to go to space. I mean, that's the nature. With what do you think back? So you're more so now because you were then.
Oh, more so.
Okay, you were.
More so than
So
ever.
what got you started? Do you think down that road? What, like, was it your upbringing? Was it your parents? Was it just something in you? You just said, that ain't right. Because that's kind of me, I think. And I'm nowhere near, I'm not comparing here. I'm just this little dude in a little town in a little show. But what was it? What was that thing, do you think? If
I
you
think
look back, what?
I think a lot of it's, I was a farm boy when I grew up in a farm, and I really loved
Okay.
hardworking. We would get up early. Never even thought about it that was normal. And so you get in and do that.
Ah,
That
there it
was
is. Go
the
ahead.
the idea is that we continually just worked. It was not a I'd come home, do chores, and then study. That was kind of the thing that I would do. And so I never thought of it as something that was hard. I just thought it was normal. And so going forward, but that carried on throughout my life. And so I looked at things that I wanted to do and things that I didn't want to do. And that's kind of it played throughout my life. And so it
That
was,
is a that. Finish your story, but just to throw in there, that's kind of where that journey comes from. That's a big part of who makes you who. Because if you're going out in the world, think about that. If everybody was raised on that farm right there, because not all farms are perfect, but most
right.
of them, you see that a lot, right? You
Yeah.
just this is natural. This is
Yeah.
natural, and you walk out of the world, which is down here. You're starting here. They're starting there. Well, what's going to happen, Steve?
Exactly. You're just going to push yourself up to the next level. But I would say too,
Yep.
try to find people that are above you. I always look at it as like
Boom.
if I love to be around people that are a lot better than me, because I know that if that's going to happen, I'm going to push myself to the next level too. And so that's really where I look at as entrepreneurs. Find people that are better than you. It doesn't matter if it's personally or if it's just financially or if it's business wise. That it really gets you to the next level. I believe that competition. What do they always say? The iron sharpens iron. That's kind of the thing. If they look at it that way,
Yeah.
you know, I would say that, and entrepreneurs are, I think, is you grow as an entrepreneur. A lot of entrepreneurs say, "I'm good." That's I'm at my ceiling. I'm good there. I'm comfortable there. But I always say that there's a better way to get to the next level. Maybe that next level is very, for whatever reason, maybe that next level is something really to the extent a lot easier than they expect. It's they find the right people, find the right capital, things like that they have brought in uh, that have actually gotten them to the next level. And that's the one thing I really see is when you become comfortable that's really a dangerous place, because then
It
it's like,
is.
that's where you look at is, what is it I can do better? Where can I go next? Those are the things that I'd say is, I look at it as, if you're comfortable, it's better to be being comfortable being uncomfortable than being comfortable.
It's kind of like I like that. That's very good. We kind of similar. Life is not a straight line, nor
No.
should it be. Nor should it be. It's a journey, right?
Yeah.
And if you're always comfortable, you're not growing. You're falling behind, literally.
Right.
And we're built, folks out there. We've got several hundred people on already, but we're built as a human species, like Steve said earlier, to go out and search the stars and go further because, well, I'll give you a great example. By the way, I'll say click it every now and then, Steve, because I'm trying this new software out, and I noticed you've stopped, and I should have warned you about that earlier.
Right.
But StreamYard just put out this thing that says, if I say click it, it'll take the 30 seconds before and it'll create an AI clip.
Oh,
it's part of the marketing that we do. So,
I see.
I'm a one man. Go ahead. What?
I figured that was probably something like that.
Yeah. The first time you did it, I saw your reaction. You were like, what do I do here? Damn it. You just told me I'm going to interrupt you. You really doing that well. Way better than even need to. But if you hear me say that I probably won't do it anymore, because there's got to be a better way. But in this case, you just say that out loud, and it's been working pretty cool. But with somebody like you who's actually paying attention to me, like I'm messing with you, and I don't mean to be doing that. But the now I forgot what the whole point that I was going off on there. The thing that we need to understand is that I'll give you an example of a story we went through on a show or a couple of shows ago. Have you ever heard the term centurion?
Yeah.
So people who live 100 years or more, right? And they did a study a decade or so ago. Maybe it was back in the 80s, 90s, something like that. But they were looking at these pockets of where centurions were living. They're a bunch of 100-year-olds in this area, and they were all over the world. They're different places, different countries. One here in Kansas, actually.
Huh?
Yeah, I think it's Kansas. So what they found out was that each of these pockets, these people were usually united because it was a pocket, but they had a mission. There was some sort of mission, like the monks, some sort of mission that they have. So when you're uncomfortable, like you just said, you got to be comfortable being uncomfortable. That's healthy. Mm-hmm. I mean, stress is one thing. Yeah, that's different. But if you're uncomfortable, that means I need to do more, right? That's what you were getting at, right? And you live longer on top of it.
Well, I always say that you have to have a purpose. A lot of times people let's say they sell their company or something like that. You got to find another purpose, right? Because otherwise, if you don't have a purpose, I believe if you don't have a purpose, your life expectancy goes down quite a bit. And so I always say is that find that purpose now while you're running the company. Or, if you're growing your company now, it's a matter of and the purpose changes, from probably from 10 years ago to now, your purpose changes. And so
it has,
but it is one thing I would say that to stay alive, you really need to have a purpose. And that's where I come back to is, looking at the book was why I wrote that book, 10X, Make the 10X Leap. I was seeing a lot of the entrepreneurs doing the same thing. They were kind of in that part where they were struggling, they were working long hours, and they were comfortable doing long hours. But they weren't doing things that they could be doing, like seeing their family, spending time with their family, traveling, doing things that they should have been doing. But if they would just look at their business outside their business instead of always being in the business, looking outside the business and then looking from the outside in. What was really nice about that then is then they can look at, okay, who do I need to replace what I've been doing, for the last 10 years? What do those people look like? And then what is it that I need to get to the next level? Is it a system that I need? Am I missing systems?
What do you mean by the people? I didn't quite
Employee.
connect that yet.
So what happens is a lot of
Okay.
times an entrepreneur is doing a lot of things that they shouldn't be doing. So and then what happens is that they can replace it with an employee. That employee, they always say, well, I can't afford it, or I don't have, I don't have enough time to train them, things like that. The best thing for them to do is look in from outside their company and say, what are the employees I need to replace me with that person? And then bring those in, just bring them in. And then I will guarantee that if you continually do that, you'll grow your company a lot faster, a lot faster. And on top of that, go ahead, Bruce.
Go ahead. No, well, I didn't know there was an on top of it. Sorry. I was just going to say, so what you're talking about there is really start, and this is a hard thing to do, especially young entrepreneurs or smaller companies that an entrepreneur has built, is to give up responsibilities. You said that employee is what you meant by that. And that makes perfect sense. It's not easy to do though, is it? And then on top of it,
I think you look at it this way. What do you want to be? Do you want to be kind of the jack of all trade guy, or do you want to be a business owner? A business owner is a lot different. A business owner actually does the things, replace the people, brings the capital in, puts the systems in place to get him outside of his company, to really get where he's a visionary. Most entrepreneurs are visionaries. And what the visionary is, get him out of the day-to-day stuff so he can do the hard stuff, so he can see the vision.
Yeah.
A lot of times they don't do that, and so they miss the big picture. That's really where it comes back into play. So
really, really good point there. Hey, all right, I've got to learn your hesitations better there, because I'm really messing with you really bad there. You're doing really good stuff, and I'm interjecting. I'm reading it wrong, and you're pausing, and then you're getting ready to say the next level point, and I'm just smacking on you there. I am so sorry. I'm trying to get this.
I'll get used to what you're doing.
Okay, you're really good at that pause, and then, but I dive into that pause, that little hole that's there. I dive in and cuddle in. Before you go on with your let me cuddle in with Bruce here. Me and Bruce are going to cuddle into that little hole right there. And I think there's a typo here, but I'm not sure about the beaver hat. Is there something I missed in my research, or 10X is one hell of a beaver hat, I think is what he's saying here?
I wonder if what the background behind me. I wonder if he's saying that behind me. I wonder if he's talking about that. Maybe the background behind me.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I even brought that up.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Bruce, great. That. Oh, I see what he's saying. Now I'm looking at move to your right. I think it's your right a little bit. Move to your right, just a hair. You got a beaver hat. That's true.
Yeah.
It's a big old kick-ass beaver hat right there.
That's what I was saying.
Okay. All right. Good call. Good call.
Right.
All right. Go ahead with what you were saying. We'll get to Rochelle here in a little bit.
So, so I'm looking at, thing is behind me is a bison. I want to go mention that before. So a buddy,
please.
A buddy of mine took this picture of a bison in the storm. And really what it means is a lot of times a bison does one thing really well. When a storm hits, a bison runs through the storm because they know they're going to get through the storm. Once they get to through the storm, it's going to be a lot better. It's kind of the same thing for entrepreneurs, is when they get through the hard stuff, they know what's going to be on the other side. It's a lot better being on the other side than it is where they're at right now. But that's where I look at it is, if you look at scaling a business, it's a lot of learning. but that's where it comes into play, is bring in people that will help you get to that next level, that's scalable. And the more you work in outside your business, it's a lot easier to scale that way than it is in your business all the time. And that's where entrepreneurs notorious for that. They tend to stick inside the business so much that they can't get out, and they can't really look at the bigger picture. So I always look at is, when I look at the company, when I want to look at investing in a company, I look at the founder, see if he's obviously ready for that. Two is, what is his bigger picture? Does he have a bigger picture? A lot of times they don't. So I bring in and look at is, okay, let's put together this big picture. If they say it's 10 million, I say, why not 50? Because I guarantee you, if it's 10 million, they're thinking too small, way too small. But if they're thinking bigger, I'm all about that. But I always say, if you can think bigger and then work backwards, every time you do that A to B, it's kind of the A to B. If you work backwards on that, then you can decide, who do you need to get in place? Who do you need? Systems, and what kind of capital do you need? Those are the things that you need to really think about. And then also too, what is it that you need to become? A lot of times entrepreneurs are, they've been grinding it out so long, really they need to become like a business owner, the true business owner.
And they may not even know what that means.
No, exactly.
At that point, they're just
so focused,
going at it.
Right. Yeah. So focused.
This is a perfect time to, if you don't mind, to bring in Rochelle's question, because we're talking about this right now as far as founders. How do they know? How do I know that the business is structurally ready to start scaling? So what is that indicator?
I think the more
indicators.
I think the indicator is, have they been doing the same thing for the last 5 years and they're not getting any more growth? Then it's a matter of like, okay, we're really stuck at this level. Then it's like
stagnant.
We're stagnant. So what is it that we need to do to get to the next level? And that's really where that becomes an exercise of working on, okay, what does that bigger vision look like? Because right now you're stuck at X and you should be trying to get to the next level. And so what that is, I would say, is it's an exercise of getting to A to B. Do that exercise all the time about how I can get to the next level. And then honestly, accessing if your business is ready for scaling, I think it's a matter of if you're ready for business to scale. Yeah. The entrepreneur. It's the entrepreneur. Are they ready to scale? It's sometimes not the business. It's more about the entrepreneur. And a lot of times.
Yeah, literally what you're saying is the business is sitting there ready to scale. Yeah. It's an entity. It is what it is. It's a series of widgets or whatever, or services that you provide. So it's ready to scale. Now you got to go to the entrepreneur, the owner, or the founder, or whatever, and say, are you ready to scale? Are you ready to be able to make more in our business, I built a machinery business. We built machinery for the equipment. So start off just selling for other people. Got really good at that. Made a lot of money. Bought another installation company. Turned it into a manufacturing company and install. Got up to about 40, 50 people. But the more that kept going, it was less and less me. It's like producer Barbie used to tell me, I did that for my ego. I do this for love. But I built that up to 40 plus people, plus contractors, and all that building, how that goes. But at some point, there's a point where we got to, $100,000 is, hey, I'm making a good, fine living for myself. Hopefully I don't have a big family or many wishes. Then you get to $1 million, and it's still that kind of lifestyle business, but it's still a business. Maybe maybe your partners with you in the business, which is usually the case.
Yeah.
Maybe a bookkeeper comes on at that point, maybe. Then you get to 5, and now you're kind of a real company, real. And I don't mean to say that mean to any mom and pop shops, but you're kind of a real company. You got a few employees, you got a tax service or accounting service, and you got a bookkeeping group person. Then you get to 12. Now you're really starting to get to a point where things are starting to change. And I think that's where that's the world that you start to develop for, right? That's your model.
That's where
I would imagine.
2 million. I like to start, say at least minimum 2 million. I would say because here's the thing, that first million, is hard. I mean, that first million's hard. It's a grind. And so once
you
get over that 2 million mark, it's not easy, but I think you're becoming, systems are in place, getting in place. Things like
operations.
Yeah.
The look of the company is really kind of already there at that point. 2 to 5, right? Yeah, I get you. Okay, I got you. Go ahead.
So that's where I would say that, a lot of times, but anything under $1 million, a lot of times, entrepreneurs still should think like that. They should think about.
Meaning what? Think like what?
They should think that, they're going to get to that. They're going to get over $1 million. They're going to get to whatever their number is. Their number is, let's say it's 10 million. They're at 250,000. If they're at 10, if they have that idea, then it becomes where they at least have a target. That becomes really important, because if you're just out there and saying, let's get to $1 million. Well, then that's a relatively easy target for them. Then it's a matter like, but if they get to that, if they set it at like 10 million and they're at 250, then they're thinking a lot better, a lot different. They're thinking a lot bigger.
And you're looking more on the horizon more now, like you drive, right? You drive looking at the horizon so you could see what's coming up. If you're just thinking 2 and you're at 800,000, whatever, if you're just thinking incrementally, I think I said in the opening, you got to think bigger strategy, or at least your vision needs to be, because you need to be driven, right? I mean, you need to have something that's like, okay, this isn't going to happen overnight, so now I've got to do things every day to do that. Create habits, right?
Yeah. Create habits, and creating habits. I go back to is your personal lifestyle is a big deal for me. Is like, what are you doing for your health? That's a big thing for me. Is health is important, and I think it really shows in business too. If you're unhealthy, sometimes your business is going to be unhealthy. So I would say is the more you can consistently do things for yourself, mind, body, and soul, work on those things. It's a matter of getting those things in place, really make a difference on the next level that you want to go to. It really does.
Yeah. I mean, your energy comes from within. Yeah. That makes perfect sense. And so you're literally so you're investing in people or your companies, but really you're investing in people, right?
You gotta think about that. You really seriously have to think about it as investing in the people, because I've looked at companies, and if I look at the company, I look at the people first before I look at the company. If it's a company that I really love, but it's not, the people aren't going to be people that I want to work with, it's not going to work. I've had that happen. I've had it happen before, and it doesn't work. So, but if it's people that I would love to work with and I want to grow their company, it's fun. It becomes a lot of fun. And quite frankly,
it is fun.
Yeah, then it becomes fun. And then it's a matter of like, where can we get this company to? How fast can we get, that's where it becomes a lot of fun then.
I gotta admit, when you said that, it's like a big smile just came on my face, because I think if growing anything is fun. A child growing up is fun. You growing up but to watch a company, and what you said makes sense. And you got to just not look at the founder. It's also that what's when the founder leaves, what's the management team look like, right?
Right.
I mean, larger company, right? Don't you that all these things? I've been involved in a couple of little acquisition things, but it's who's going to be there when the founder's gone, right?
So true. I mean, that's the thing you got to look at is who's going to be there.
Okay.
And the other thing I look at too is entrepreneurs, if they find, usually the visionary is somebody that's really kind of like the dreamer, the one that really sees the bigger picture. They better bring somebody in that actually can do the work, because a lot of times they need to do this, somebody that does the work. And that's really where it comes into play too, is like, get that person in there that does the work at top, because the visionary is always going to see something bigger, shinier, things like that. You got to bring somebody in that's going to either bring you down, because it brings you to the level where like, hey, we got to get this stuff done. And so that's where it comes into play. And that can be fun.
So the adult in the room then is what you got to make sure you have.
You have at least one adult in the room, because
at least one.
At least. But a lot of times you'll see entrepreneurs will see a shiny object where like maybe they see somebody doing really well in that industry or something that's not even in their industry. And they're thinking, well, maybe we can do an acquisition, things like that. But they need to really think about what lane they're in. Are they in the right lane? Are they doing the right things? And so that's continually, and that's where I would say, they got the implementer, the one that actually does the work. So.
Yeah. Let me ask you something. I've been looking at this since the very beginning of very few minutes early on in the show. And I have no idea. Is there do you know this person, or is this somebody just catfishing us right now here?
I don't think I know that person.
Grape horn?
I don't know what.
Aren't you normally watching grape horn right now? I don't even know what grape horn is.
I don't even know what that is.
I think and I don't recognize that picture. It looks like a younger.
I don't recognize the picture either. So that's.
I think somebody's messing around with us. Let's move on. So Daniel here, how do you balance vision with operational discipline during rapid growth? And this makes a lot of sense. This question I've been so excited to ask because it's a tough question. Daniel, I love this. I assume it's a really good question.
It is, because here's the thing. So operational discipline, I would say a lot of times what happens is that visionary wants to run, 100 miles an hour. And so you have to have an operation that actually can catch up with it. Because a lot of times what you'll see is a visionary will have like 5 or 10 things that they come in, and then they just try to blow this company up. Well, they got to remember they got people behind them that's going to push this stuff. And so if they continually if they're continually changing it, that is a deal killer. And the other problem is you start losing employees, the things that you really need to have that kind of in check, the balancing between both. And that's where the visionary and that operation person have to be in sync. I go back to, there was a company that I was part of, and the entrepreneur, visionary, and the operation guy they worked really well together. But if you talk to them about when we did the sale of it, you talk to them about what it was like. The visionary is like, this was great, I want to do this again. The operation guys, that was hard. I just want to wait. I want to just rest a little bit before we do it again. So it was that balance, but they had a really good relationship between the two. So they really worked well. And that's where I look at is that kind of that person that you can work with that can get you the next level, because the visionary is going to go, can typically run if you let them. It's matter like, how do you, if you're gonna let them run, it's that rapid growth can sometimes be too fast, and so it's a matter like enjoy, but I also say enjoy that ride.
Yeah, enjoy the ride. Make sure you have the reins tight. By the way, I wasn't even paying attention. We have well over 600 people on right now.
Wow. Okay.
Big jump sometime in the last, I haven't looked at the clock since early on.
Right.
And you know what? We're almost at an hour already.
Nope.
I don't know if
And
that time went fast for you, but yeah, bam,
flew.
that just flew by. I mean, we're not even, you have more time because we've got a bunch more questions. And I think we're getting into some really interesting questions for me that are fascinating. The other thing I want to add, when you're talking about that visionary, that, and I've been there, I've done that, and it can really stub your toe, and I get that. Visionary, you know, hey, we can do this and that, and we can do this. Yeah. But the other thing you have to realize, if you start losing employees because you're overpacking, they can't handle it, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But then also, you may have I shouldn't be pointing behind me. You have employees that are the backbone of that company, and you're putting this, like, I had a really tough transition. My company did, because I saw it. It makes sense. I bought this installation company because I was selling this equipment, and every time I sold a $1 million piece of equipment, whatever, there was a $500,000 install, and I'm thinking, fuck, that's a lot of money, because that's actually more money than the commission I was getting off of my business selling for that other company, right?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, leaving money on the table every single deal, you know, and I'm pretty good at sales, so a lot of deals going through. So I'm doing the numbers. So I was pulling about $500,000 a year. So I took some of that and I bought a company for a couple mil. And I thought, okay. But the reason I bought that installation company, after I started going through of it, I said, why don't we build some of this goddamn equipment? Now you're talking 40, 50, 40-ish margins, right? You're talking some pretty good margin. And here's the ego part. I always wanted to have what's it called? I can't even, I'm going blank on the name now. When you get a patent, I always wanted my name in the patent office. I wanted my company to have a patent. And my point being, all this, I was driving ahead because of this vision stuff. My employees couldn't, I mean, I had to go out and hire more engineers now, and I had to do, and I never got to the patent part. I was too busy trying to work the damn company. And finally, it's like, you know what? I have more fun doing these videos, interviewing industrial leaders and that. Yeah. And that's kind of where, you know, because I grew up in college. I grew up in college. I didn't grow up till well after college. I had a business administration BA and music or theater. I really should have went the theater way, but you know, most grown-ups go you meet somebody in college, you have a kid after, and now you got to, okay, I'm going to do the grown-up thing. But I couldn't just work for somebody. I had to go start a business. So, you know, I drove that direction. And then my midlife crisis wasn't wanting a Porsche. Been there, done that. Wanted to do what I actually have more fun at, which isn't hiring 10,000 people to build, you know, 40,000 machines that weigh 15,000 pounds a piece. Although I got to admit, that was pretty cool watching that shit drive off the ramp when they're pulling away. I got to admit, that was pretty cool. It was a great time for my life, but it's interesting what you said as you're driving that. You got to have a grown up in the room, because that grown up would have told me, hey, Rod, somebody I trusted too. Yeah. You know, you got to trust that person. So that was an interesting thing that you were talking about there. But yeah, and that's an aspect. You got to really know your business and yourself. And as you're driving all this forward, you got to really have somebody that's beside you that you can and that may be you. I mean, if you're investing in somebody's company, that's that person, or at least a person, right?
A lot of times
you want it to be.
Yeah,
you want it to be too.
I always come in and say, if you just want capital, I'm not the guy. I mean, it's like, because I'm going to bring in, I want to grow this company just as much as the entrepreneur does, and so I'm going to try to do as much as I can to get it to that next level. You know, I think a lot of times there's a lot of things that you can do that most entrepreneurs don't even think about. And so that's where I come in and look at, the company and say, okay, we can do maybe something a bit different. So
I'm glad you said that, because I was just going to ask. So what does that look like when you come and say, hey, Steve, man, we're just getting going here. We got a nice little ramp thing going here, but we're just this, and I can really see where this can go. I've got that vision. So what does it look like when you say, okay, Rod, let's talk. We had a meeting. Everything looks good. Let's do so. So now we do something. What does that look like if you and I are working together?
If it's going to be, I always say, if it's just capital, a lot of times that's not the first thing that they need to start with. That's really what it comes down to, is like, what's that plan that you're going to put, if you use that capital, put it in place. Because a lot of times what happens, they get capital and they spend it on things that they shouldn't be spending it on. So that's where I come in, and it's like, let's put together a plan to get that once we get the capital in, we're going to bring in people, probably put some systems in place. That's the one thing is, what we're seeing is, when do you consider outside capital? I seriously would think right away. I mean, a lot of times that I always say to
what do you mean by wait, whoa? What do you mean by right away? So I went down, I got my LLC, I turned around, I rented my building or whatever, and I walk in the front door. My next call is to you.
No, I would say is you got a company up and running. Let's say this, but I would say the one thing is, a lot of times entrepreneurs start too slow, meaning they do is,
yes,
they don't think about it, and all of a sudden they need it. So I always say, go before you actually need it. And that's really what it comes into play, is when you're thinking about growing a company and you want to grow it, let's say it's at 5 million, you want to grow it to 50. That's where you come in and work on going backwards, and then decide, what do we need for capital to get this thing running the way it needs to. And if you need capital, a lot of times entrepreneurs are, that's the other thing is, entrepreneurs a lot of times think capital will fix everything. And a lot of times it doesn't. That it makes problems worse if you don't have them corrected to begin with. I've seen it many times where entrepreneurs bring in a large amount of capital, and all of a sudden they're in the same place they were, 10 years from now. And it's because that capital they didn't have the things in place to get to them the next level. And that was what really hurt them.
Okay, you got me curious on the line here. I think we're going to stay here for a minute, if you don't mind. So capital, you think about early. You don't necessarily call the first week you're in operations, but you know that down the road you're going to need something. So maybe along you're tucking away some information that you can resource later. Okay, right. I got that. Now, so when you come in, so we're at a point here, you and I, we've moved down the road. It all looks pretty interesting and comfortable and the right fit, and it all looks beautiful. Nice little thing. And we say, okay, let's put some capital into this company and make it next level. We want to build that whole regeneration school project, and it's going to take some work, some marketing, this and that. So you come in, and if it's just capital, you're not the right guy, and that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. But you being the right guy for somebody like me, who's just me, and I've got my vision and all of that stuff. What do you do when you come in? So the reason I'm asking this whole thing is because you said they may bring in capital, but then spend it on the wrong thing.
Always do. Yeah.
Okay. So what are you looking at? What are you looking? So let's say it's this little show that we've got here. I'm a columnist for the newspaper. I've got 3 Substacks. We issue Substacks 3 times a week, and that's a news thing of sort. And I'm working on getting some radio right now. I'm working on that. But basically we're this, right?
Yep.
And we've got these other goals. What are you doing when you come in? I'm basically stepping back and just at this point communicating with you while you're analyzing and still doing my job here, my thing. But what are you looking at that at some point we're going to discuss and then so how does that relationship work? Because that's a big deal. It's like capital and in you coming in helps support the protection of your capital that you're investing. Right. So good. But it's a win-win too, because you're now basically saying, okay, I'm bringing in this money. I know money. I know what companies need. I know where they need money at, or, what are you looking at? How do you make those decisions? What decisions are you making? What can I know what's in your head when you walk into my business?
So when I look at a company, the one thing I look at is, do they have a renewable, do they have, January 1, they know they're going to make some income. What is their income? What is that income going to be consistently? They're not selling a widget. They're not selling another. If they're consistently doing something to make a subscription model or something like that, what are they doing to make consistent capital and consistent money? If they don't have that in place, that's number one thing we work on is get that in place. Get it something that we can do. The other thing is too, a lot of times entrepreneurs say, we're just selling a product. We're not doing, if you're just selling a product, you're just a commodity. You're just becoming a commodity like anybody else. But if you bring in your customer into your ecosystem, into your company, that is where it really becomes big. That's becomes sticky. I love that. The more things that you can create to keep that customer happy and happy that they're going to be not only going to buy more from you, they're going to bring other people to buy stuff from you. I don't care what it is. It can be anything. Manufacturing is, I love manufacturing, but I look at things like that. I look at how can we create things that I will do January 1. I know I'm going to make this kind of capital to start with. And then on top of that, is a subscription model? Do they have things like that? If they don't, we work on that stuff right away, because that's really important.
So you'll roll up the sleeves,
I'll roll up sleeves
and say, hey, Rod, you got this Substack thing going on here. You got a few subscriptions, I know a little bit about this. And you dive in.
Either that, here's the other thing is I'll bring in,
or you tell how I can dive in.
I'll bring somebody in. I'll bring somebody from the outside. So I'll bring somebody outside. So that would be the other thing is I can bring in people that will, if I don't know it, which I don't know everything, if I don't know it, I can bring somebody else in. And that's another powerful thing is I'll bring in people that they typically will need.
That's huge.
Either to get to the next level. And that's where it comes into play. Capital, like I said, capital's great.
So you have a whole resource as well. So you're a smart guy, ABCD. I'm a smart guy. I know. I like to put it this way. I know a little tiny bit about a whole lot of things. That's why I do this show. Because I bring in the expert, but I can communicate with you and have a conversation and roll it down the line there. So I know, and then there's a couple things I know a whole heck of a lot about, right? And so that's what you're talking about right now. And then I bring in an expert, just like what you would do. Right. So you bring in an expert, probably pulls off of that capital that you're investing in, but you're getting the biggest bang for your buck with this other expert that you brought in, right? That's the pitch. It's kind of like in the model you're looking for in my case, it would be, a monthly regenerative income, just a model. That model is, I want to get to that. I mean, can you imagine $9 a subscription a month at $1,000? 1,000 people, or, you got to balance those numbers to get whatever that number is. But the model you're talking about, when you're emerging, somebody's like the car model, the car dealership. They have a Ford, they sell you that car. I'm just saying Ford, whatever. I don't actually have a Ford, but I have a nice little Alfa Romeo, actually. You ever have one of those cars? That's a freaking awesome car. But anyway, you have that. They sell you the car, then they do your maintenance.
Yeah.
Hopefully your tires and your windshield wipers and your oil changes, and then you hit something and you broke an axe. I don't know, you broke something and you got to go in and get it. That's what you're talking about, where you're pulling more than just buying a car
So true.
off of that customer, right? That's the immersion you're talking about.
But I also say add value to that customer. That's the one thing.
True.
Bring, if you're just, I always say that how much value can you add to the customer because the more value you can bring to that customer, because really, quite frankly, the customer doesn't care about you. They don't care about your product. They don't care. They just want to know what it's going to do for them. So that's where it comes into play.
And there's nothing wrong with that. That's expected.
No, it's expected. But that's where the value comes into play, is like bring the value to the customer. They're going to have an experience that probably nobody else would have at the competitor down the road. That's one thing is that you continually do, is that I look at it as a white glove service. What is your white glove? What is it you're creating for your customer that customer is going to stay with you no matter what?
Oh, okay. So I'm off. So I was off in that, what I just said. I mean, that model is true, but what you were saying was immerse them in your ecosystem with the white gloves, so they don't want to go anywhere else.
Oh.
Are you kidding me? Billy Bob treats me better than Sally Sue did.
Right.
And I'm going to Billy Bob all the time.
Yeah. I mean, that's where the
yeah. Okay.
And then it becomes very sticky. If you had the experiences that you go through, you look at companies that you've worked with, that you probably remembered a great experience. That experience made whatever you made you feel with that, it becomes very sticky. They can charge you a little bit more because of that, and you're going to pay it because you're going to that experience. Every time you'll pay a lot more.
Let me ask you this. So when you walk into somebody's business after a point, not like the second the door opens, but can you identify what that sticky, what they can do to become sticky?
A lot of times they miss it because they're so far in.
Right. They're in it.
So I can come in and look at what things that they can do right away that make changes.
The price, guys.
A lot of times pricing makes a difference too. A lot of times entrepreneurs are so afraid that they're going to charge too much and they're going to lose customers. Quite frankly, it's a matter, like a lot of times they miss price. That's kind of the other thing is too. But then look at it as
too low or too high.
Too low. A lot of times too low.
You know what? You're right. I always had that argument with producer Barbie back in the machinery business. So I'm not the only idiot out there then.
Well, it's really easy to
I'm joking,
but it's really easy to do that, because here's the thing. Nobody really wants to change the way they think or do. They're afraid that they're gonna make I would say make a mistake. And so they don't want to upset it. But if they change it completely, where they're working for their customer, they're doing things that nobody else is doing. I mean, it's obvious, and that's in every industry. There's so many industries out there that say, well, ours is different. It's never different. It's never.
I mean, the products are different, but the way business operates is basically the same. Not basically. I mean, I see that now. I see that now. I'm old. It would have been nice to see this at 20, but what is the old saying? Hindsight is always 20/20, right?
Right.
Duh. But I mean, right? All industry runs basically, or all businesses basically run exactly the same. Now that I think about it.
A lot of times they do. Obviously, they always say, like I said, a lot of times entrepreneurs say, oh, our business is different. It's a product or a service. You're selling a product or service. And then it's a matter of, from there, it's what can we do
from that point on?
Then you got to do is you got to make yourself look different. I always say is, if you're in a commodity-based business, how do you make yourself look different? You got to really think about it. That's really the thing is, make yourself so much different than everybody else that they don't even think it, you're in that industry. That's
Interesting.
you can do.
Now that's when you say commodity-based business, you mean just anybody selling a thing that's got a lot of competition.
Right.
Your first goal is, okay, how do I stand out? Everybody wants to stand out. Not just more marketing, not just that, but it's Steve and I getting together saying, okay, how do I look different? Where's my white glove?
Yep.
Right?
Always the case.
Listen to this, folks.
Look different, and that's where it becomes fun, because then
Big deal right here. Yeah.
You do is you start interviewing your customers and look and see why they're buying your product. You really got to know your customer more than you probably need to know the customer more than they know themselves. That's what it comes down. And so, look at Steve Jobs is a good example of somebody that did really well in that industry. He did really well.
He was really good at that. Really good.
You look at, he created things that customers didn't even know they needed. That's the one thing you look at.
That's something he made famous. He famously said was, I don't give a shit what the customer wants. They don't even know what they want. Right. I know what they want. But I mean, that's a Steve Jobism, so to speak. But he's speaking truth, but he's not speaking truth. He knew what they didn't know what they wanted because it wasn't there yet. Correct. He's creating something they knew they were going to need. That's what he was saying.
He was a true visionary.
Just being an ass about it, the biggest ass that he is. But okay.
But he was looking at it as a true visionary. He was looking at stuff that
absolutely
so farther ahead than anybody else was, and that's what it comes down to.
He's like the Tesla back in the day or today. The owner of Tesla. I mean, he's kind of that level. Yeah, Musk is. But no matter what politics is done with his name these days, whatever, that dude is amazing. And that visionary like Steve was.
So you got to look too, though. What are those? I look at Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, Warren Buffett. What are all those guys really good?
Another one.
They have a really good product, but you know what they're really good at? Marketing. They're really good at marketing. They're really good at marketing themselves. They're really good at marketing their company. And that's the one thing I would say a lot of entrepreneurs don't do. They don't get outside their shell to do the things to get themselves looking different. All those people I just mentioned, they look different. And that's the thing. Their company maybe looked similar to some other companies out there, but they made it look different. They made it make so much different. That's where
they marketed it that way. Now that you say that,
yeah.
Wow, that's very, very, very good. Now let's stay with that for a second. Olivia here. Check out what Olivia is asking. It's perfect timing here.
Well,
or you saw it and knew to lean into this.
Yeah. So I think a lot of times, entrepreneurs mentally
got to prepare.
They do. But it is the practice of looking at where they want to go, because it's so important to have that, at least have something on paper to say, we're going to go to this next level. It becomes a lot easier to mentally look at that then too. And it's all about visualization then. Becomes that idea is like, how does that look? What does it feel like to be there the next level? If you're at, let's say I go back to that 5 and you want to go at 50, how does all that look? The mental clarity that you can get by just doing that work really makes a really next leap for you. And I think that's where it comes into place.
So I'm gonna skip a few questions here that we'll get back to in a second, but I want to stay on this 10x leap because it's a different side of the coin here that Juan has to say or ask. What's the first practical? And there's one you're gonna love here in a second. Here's the dude saying, okay, well, what about when you get past 7 figures? So there's a dude here that you're going to want to see his comment or his question. What's the first practical step towards making the true 10x leap? So before, the question was, how can leaders prepare themselves? So I prepared myself. I'm getting ready to make that 10x leap. It's your book we're talking about
Yep.
here, and all the things that you've learned by helping companies. And like you said, if you're thinking 10 million, really 10x, you should be thinking 100 million. What is that? So here's two things in that 10x step. What is the first practical step? Okay, I know it's coming. What do I do now? I'm that guy.
So basically,
Person. I'm that person.
the first practical step is find a person that's done it.
Okay.
That's
mentorish.
that's gotten there. Find people that have done it.
Good point.
Because it really helps when you're starting those steps. It's a matter of like, you can start stepping that direction, but it makes it a lot easier when you have somebody behind you that has done that. That's where the really
Makes
comes.
sense.
Then it's a matter of like, okay, the practical steps are, I know I want to go to 100 million. What does that look like? How does it feel? And then it's go backwards again. Like I said, work backwards. Then it's a matter of like, who do I need to get? What do I need to get for systems? What kind of capital I need? But also too is, what do I need to become? Who is it that I need to become? Because that's going to be important, because the person that's at 3 million is going to be a lot different than when they're at 100 million, because that person, it's going to be a lot different. And so you got to have.
You ever watch Landman?
I have, yes. Yeah.
Okay, so it's the difference between the president of the oil company who's flying around in the jets and his son.
Correct.
Who just hit six. I don't know how far you have watched the show, but I just started it and I am addicted to it. But the son, drives a beat up. He's a hard worker. He's an entrepreneur. He's got the vision, right? He's this $1 million, $3 million person. Just still kind of a lifestyle. I mean, you're able to draw a pretty good salary now.
Right.
Before it was whatever was left in the company you could take.
Right.
Now it's probably a little bit more. But I compare that, who are you going to be? Because you're different if you're the father in that case.
So true.
And the wife and the daughter and then the boy, because that's the perfect. A lot of people watch Landman. That's why I wanted to bring that in. I think that makes a good picture.
But also too is that that there's two ideas that I think that the son is trying to bring in investors in from outside, and that's that's where the smart.
Got to be careful.
It becomes where the smart capital. I always say it's, what do you want to bring in? You want to bring smart capital, or do you want to bring in just capital? That's really what it comes to play. And that's where it becomes really important. You're interviewing investors just as much as them interviewing you, because quite frankly, it can be really hell if you got to bring in an investor that you really don't enjoy being around.
Well, and or if you're bringing in an investor, or you're going to a bank, let's say, and you're getting a loan from a bank.
Correct.
They're not going to help you. They're going to say, okay, you qualify. Here's $1 million. Here's $10 million. Here's whatever. But then at the end of the day, you brought up that point. I, as the visionary, I'm really good at a lot of things. Spending money isn't necessarily the best thing. So having this expertise, this expert on my team, on our team, in the company's team, that's a big deal. That's better than a bank. It seems to me now.
I say smart money is better than bringing capital in, because they'll get you to the next level. I mean, that's quite frankly, it's better to do that. And a lot of times entrepreneurs they start just bringing in capital just in general, and that's becomes a problem.
I can see that now.
Yeah, I've done that, and that's what I've struggled with. Is you have 10 investors, and all of a sudden you have that one of the 10. That's the problem. You either have to buy him out, or you have to make sure that that he's not going to be a problem. So that's a whole nother level of stuff you don't need to deal with
when
No.
you're already dealing with day in and day out stuff.
Correct. And that's where I come into play, because then I
I
take
like
care,
that.
I take care of all that stuff. I bring in I have the investors that I take care of. I make sure that that's taken care of. They don't, so the entrepreneur doesn't have to deal with that. That was
I
because
like that.
that's a really can be, something that's going to slow them down. They don't need that.
100%. Yeah, and that's anti, because you still need to play your own roles, right?
Oh,
At that point,
so
you have roles now.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, you always need
So
to.
Branson, I want to give you the little icing on the cake. We got another couple of questions here, but Branson here, I this one struck me. How should founders rethink hustle? I like this question because it's multi-complex.
Yeah.
Rethink hustle as they move past 7 figures.
Man, that's an interesting question, because
It is.
because here's the thing, hustle, that first million, that is exactly what they're doing, is that hustle.
Oh, can I stop?
Yeah.
I meant to bring this up earlier. Not having somebody like you for the next 12 million, 20 million, 40 million is like making that you were just going to remake the point. Is like making that first million. It's still tough. That first million is tough because you're doing it on your own. You don't know anything.
No.
You're just learning. It's really fucking hard, pardon my language, but hard to do.
Yeah.
If you continue going on, that getting to 12, there's that million again, different numbers, because it's new stuff, right?
I'll give you a story. So I was working with this company. We were thinking about investing in the company. He had struggled. He was at 18 million. And he was struggling. He was cash flowing, but he was barely cash flowing. The biggest problem he had was he was making parts for a lot of different companies. Sounds like that's what you were doing at one time. What I suggested to him is, why not become the brand maker? The margins are higher. You're producing everything. Employees get it because they're building a brand versus they're building one piece at a time. Right.
Ooh.
It made their company so much different because it went from them making parts to making a brand. And what happened? Employees become stickier. Their customers became a lot better, more attentive. It became a whole different company just because of that.
Wow.
And so that's where I look at is when you're looking at, go back to the hustle, rethink hustle. I think it's really rethink about it is, who can I bring in that's going to help me alleviate the hustle? Meaning, who can I bring in from either a mentor or something like that says, hey, you're at $1 million. I've been there. I've done that. This is what we did different to get to us the next level. Those are the things that rethink that hustle is, bring people in that have done it already. It changes the mindset completely if you do that. It'll get you the next level a lot faster, a lot easier. You're going to bring in a lot more different energy. It's going to be a completely different energy if you do it that way.
And you said a lot faster. So it's like if you have a relay, right? And you have a baton you're handing off.
Yeah.
Right? So you're continuing you're handing that off instead of now I need this new thing. Now I got to go back to the starting line. You ready for the gun and start over again. Get that momentum on that next thing. Okay, that makes sense. I like pictures. So that kind of makes sense, right? It's a handoff and a relay versus starting each quarter or each lap from the starting line, starting off again. But probably more so.
Well, but I would say that entrepreneurs, don't be afraid to ask. They can say no. That's the biggest thing is, okay, they say no. Okay, there's a lot more companies out there, a lot more people out there that have done it in different industries. You can use or at least get some information from them. I mean, and a lot of entrepreneurs love to share stuff with other entrepreneurs. They do. They just do.
And there's even where you get together, where you what's the word? Going blank on the word. Where you mingle, there's different things out there that you can really get involved with people and other things and asking, because there is a considerable difference when you get at those scalable points.
So
when
true.
I think 5 and 12 are typical numbers, and then 30 I think is kind of another block.
Yeah.
Where it really jumps to a different thing. But what you're saying, I love the concept, not the concept. I love your journey. I love your platform. I love what you're doing there, and that you're bringing in capital, but you're probably bringing in an even more important capital, which is, let's spend it this way and do this, and that's how this will happen. I've been there doing that before, and this is what I saw before. You're a visionary and you're a smart guy, Rod, but this is what, that package, that hard capital, that Steve capital has got to be at least as valuable, especially when you're bringing in dollars to be spent in the right direction. Right.
That's really important. When it does that, that's really what it got. Yeah.
So before we kind of wrap up, one thing I want to do is I want to get in the private chat. I want to get your contact information.
Yeah.
You've done a lot of these. You know how it is.
Yeah.
Somebody will come a week after, or a day after, or a minute after, and they're like, I wish I would have talked to Steve. I would have asked him this question.
Yeah.
Well, if they leave it on the web, on the show itself, I may get to it in a week. I don't know, whatever. Right. But if they have your contact information, they can go straight to you.
You can do.
Go ahead. What?
I can say, just if you want to contact, you can reach out, steve@bisonequitygroup.com, or just go to LinkedIn.
Can you type that in? Can you type that into the private chat there? Do you see the private chat on your right side there?
Oh.
While I'm reading this next one, if you type that in, it'll give me a little red light. I know it's there. I'll copy and paste it actually into the comments. That way it's permanent. It's there. Although they could listen to it again as well. But
for some reason, it won't allow me.
You just dropped yourself out. Okay, so I'm gonna cover for Steve here. Hi, Steve. Come on back in when you're. I think he hit the wrong button there. But so we're gonna get to Kobe here in a second. And Kobe asked, how do investors evaluate readiness beyond just revenue numbers? All right, he's coming on. Hold on, his camera's not on yet. His mic's off. Okay, you can talk. There we go. All right, wrong button. Something happened to you. But do you see? You don't see a private chat there?
Yeah, it doesn't come. It won't come up for me for whatever reason.
Huh?
I just.
Do you see comments, or do you see a private chat? It's called private chat.
No, it doesn't.
Here, wait. I'll give you a hint. Let me see if a light. It's live. These are friends of mine, so we're being unprofessional. Do you see that? That's where I want you to put it in. I don't know what you're looking at because I've never been a guest on Streamline. So I've looked at it a couple. There's still that same amount of people here, Steve. Well, I mean, it's been an hour and a half now. It's been an hour and a half, and they're still on. 600.
Wow.
647 people. They're just locked into what you're saying here. I think we got some good information coming ahead. I really believe that there's going to be a lot of push into your industry, what I'll call entrepreneurship, right? Because the world is changing so much. I don't think they're trusting the system so much, maybe more trusting themselves. And that's what built America. So that's a good thing, isn't it?
Oh, it's always been a good thing. I think that's really what it comes down to is, what's built America is small businesses. But here's the thing. I say one thing. Small businesses are only small because that's what the owner thinks of their company.
Ooh.
So that's
that.
really down to. If you look at it, that's the only reason it's small. The reason why you can grow a company so many different ways. And it's a matter of like how they think. And if they continually tell themselves it's a small company, it's going to be small.
It's going to be a small company.
Yeah.
All right, then that's perfect for there's your information, Steve. All that's typed out right, correct?
Yes.
And then I want to come up here and I want to say exactly what you just said, but in a question from Kobe. How do investors evaluate readiness beyond just revenue numbers? First of all, you got to have the mindset, which you're just talking about. But answer Kobe, and then let's roll into a finishing kind of. What do you want to leave 700 freaking people with? I haven't had 700 in a little bit, so congrats, good job, man.
Thanks. So the one thing I would look at is readiness beyond just revenue numbers. It comes down to what's your employees like? You know, are the employees ready? You know, are your employees ready? So here's the thing I see a lot of times when a company wants to grow and they want to grow relatively fast, there's some employees that are going to like push back. You may have employees that are push back because they've been doing it the same way for the same time. That person, either you're going to have to change it and put them someplace else, or you're going to have to remove them. One of the two. And that's the one thing I look at is it is going to be the hard part is if you want to grow, you got to look at all the people you have on board and see if they're ready to grow. And that's where, you know, you look at, you know, the mindset of them is I always run everybody through a predictive index to see who I'm talking to. I would be running all the employees through a predictive index too.
Is that a software?
It's basically set up to figure out who I'm talking to, what kind of person I'm talking to.
Is it like what companies do with Kobe, employees, the personality thing?
Yep, Kobe or something.
Okay,
like that.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
It helps because it does really help because then I know who I'm talking to. Then it's a matter of like, but the revenue, it is before the revenue numbers. It is, am I ready as a founder? Is it my employees ready are they ready? You know, that's the thing. Is our company positioned to grow? Do we have the right systems in place? Things like that. Because the system's going to make a difference too. You know, the accounting software, what other things that we have?
There you go. Okay.
You know, those are
all right. So you're talking about the infrastructure, the ops, how are those all written out? You know, do you have your scalable up to the point of all the things you're talking about until you improve or build upon those things?
The other thing is too, do I know my customer? Do I really know my customer base? That's going to be the thing is, if you don't really know your customer base, if you're selling, like for instance, if you're just selling widgets on Amazon, you really don't know your customer base, but you really need to figure out who your customers are. And that's going to be another really important thing is dial down who you know your customer is, who that true customer is. And then it's, you know, I go back to is that an avatar, create the avatar. You may have 3 avatars in your industry or your business, but each person has a name. You know, you create that name for that customer, that avatar. And then from there, it's a matter of like, okay, I got all this in place. Then it's a matter of like, what do I need to get? If I need to get capital, what kind of capital do I want to bring in? And that's, you know, the important thing.
Very, 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 very good discussion. Do you want to leave a final comment? I'll throw you in the green room while I wind this down. And well, not physically. You're a big guy. You look like you're pretty strong. So I don't. There was a day maybe I could do that. But figuratively, before I throw you in the green room, you want to leave a closing additional. I know that was kind of a closing comment, or you just want to wave and I'll see you in the green room.
I go back to the same thing is, you know,
listen to these words of wisdom, folks.
Entrepreneurs are fun to be around, but here's the thing. Entrepreneurs got to think bigger than what they are right now. I don't care what it is, where they're at in their journey. Think bigger, but also think about what kind of impact I want to leave the world. That's the other thing too. If I'm just creating a widget just to create a widget, you're going to get bored.
Yeah.
Most of the time is
that mission
about what you want to do in this world. And that's the one thing that's important. I would say that that's just as important as what you're doing, you know, creating the widget or the service, one of the two. So that was, you know, I would say, and also look at your company bigger than it is now. Don't think of it as small, think of it as big, and thinking about what can I do to get to that next level, that 10X. What is 10X to you? Because every 10X is different.
Yeah. It's the beauty of being a human, isn't it?
So true.
All right, brother. Give everybody a big wave. I'll see you on the other side. Hang out for me. Stay away from those peanuts. All right. So, hey, great show. God, I mean, folks, we're closer to 700 than 6. I haven't had a 6 in a little bit. So, Steve, thank you. Great job. Folks, great questions. We've obviously got some really interested people here. Let me bring this back up here. I'm going to leave that as a sitting. Sometimes people leave really cool comments at the end, and I'll leave that as last. But we're going to leave Steve's contact information here. Sounds like there's some people that fit into this world that maybe can take some use out of. I know I can, for sure. I hope to have a fun little conversation with Steve momentarily. But in the meantime, I want to kind of close this down a little bit. Let me bring this over, and I hope everybody understood that today is a day of being able to look at financial responsibilities that we kind of over the last 2 weeks have been doing that. In that we've been we talked about last week. We talked about voices at the table and showing up, and being there, whether you're dented or perfect, being there for your family, for your community, and all that. And this week we've kind of but we've kind of blended that message into a message of being able to stand on your own 2 feet financially. Financially living in dignity, financially being able to take care of your family. Financial awareness is not greed, it's compassion in action, is what producer Barbie calls it. So as we wrap up today's conversation, what stands out to me the most about Steve's story was not just his ambition, but actually his restraint. Knowing where and when and what mindset you need to have in taking that 10X leap. You've got to have some restraint in saying, where do I really want to go? Where does this company really want to be at? What is my mission? It's a widget, yeah, but what am I here to fix the world about? And that's something I feel very strongly about and agree with 100%. We're here to change the school system, which is here to change the world. So somebody asked me that question, it's a very easy answer. I'm here to change the world. The understanding that real growth is not about chasing more, but about becoming capable of handling more. And you heard that throughout the message today, handling that what's coming up. You're at 3 million, you're at 1 million. You're a different person. We just talked about this than you are at 10 million and 30 million, right? We use that example of the landman. That lesson applies whether you're building a business, raising a family, or helping shape the next generation of leaders. And that's exactly why conversations like this matters. If today's discussion resonated with you at all, and there were a lot of people on here today, the best way to support this work is simple and it's meaningful. First, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You guys know it. It's at Rod Duff 1939 on YouTube. We air live 6 days a week, and we also are on replay anytime you want to see it. Your subscription helps independent conversations like this stay visible and accessible. Second, join our Substack. Substack is insightstraighttalk.substack.com. We do that. We publish that. I publish that 3 times a week. And what's interesting about that is So we do on Mondays, we do a Barbieisms. And we take this theme through the week, like what we're in now. And you'll see that through all these writings. But in Barbieisms, we take a different tact at what the conversation was about today. And look at it through, let's say, just a slightly different lens, through producer Barbie's lens, and what messages she pulls out that are important. On Wednesdays, we do what's called Poems and Pages, or Pages and Poems. Pages and Poems is, I'm a poet. I've written thousands and thousands, literally thousands of poems, but I also have a book out that is on query. It's a memoir of sorts. It's called WTF Happened When I Was in My 50s, 13 Whispered Things. And in those 13 whispered things are all these topics that we talk about on this show. So those things that we publish are the subject of the day, but coming through a different tact. And then on Friday, so this coming Friday, I'm going to go back and review this show as well as the others, as well as last Saturday's show, because obviously next Saturday is after Friday. But anyway, we review those shows and then use those messages into the overall message of the week. And I think it's a really good combination for people, because you get different. To me, learning is in school now is basically about memorization. But if you can get different angles at a subject, I've learned from this show that I can talk to multiple different experts about the same topic, but there's always some slightly different angles. For instance, Steve today in how he approaches his business. Very fascinating stuff. So we publish 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays on the Substack with deeper reflections. And we do a lot of behind the scenes content and written pieces that extend these conversations beyond whatever I could do in a broadcast. And finally, I invite you to check out my weekly column once a week, every Friday, in the Mangum Star newspaper, where I continue exploring these themes and responsibilities, but tying in the local community, Greer County, because this is where Regeneration School project is coming in. Community and growth in print. You can find it on the second page. I take up about the first half of the second page in the newspaper at www.mangumstar.com, MANGUMSTAR.com. Support doesn't always mean money. Sometimes it just means attention. And that was the beauty of Steve's message today, because it's not just about money. Sometimes it's about sharing. Sometimes it means choosing depth over noise. Steve Walsh's work reminds us that every meaningful leap begins with clarity. Who you are you ready? And with a decision is where it starts. Thank you for spending a part of your day with us. Thank you. Thank you to our sponsors and our partners who make this possible each and every day. And thank you for being part of this community that values thoughtful conversation. And we'll see you next time on Insights and Straight Talk. My name's Rod Duff. I am your host. And as always, I say stay right after the outro video where you'll see producer Barbie. And I always say some sort of goofy little thing. I'll see you on the other side of that. But with that, my name's Rod Duff. I'm your host, and I am out.
Before you leave, if you'd like to watch another one of the podcasts, click the first link in the description. We love having you here, and we appreciate all your support.
And with that, producer Barbie and I are out. Come on, entrepreneur.